Welcome to the Dare County Master Gardener's presentation on rain gardens. My name is Gemma Green, and I am an Extension Master Gardener volunteer with Dare County. Today we'll talk about rain gardens in the residential setting and how they offer a simple solution to some big issues. We'll discuss what it is, how it works, why put one in other words, the benefits of a rain garden, the best location for one, how to create a rain garden on your property, as well as show you some of the plants that do well in rain gardens, especially here on the North Carolina coast. And finally, we'll go through an actual installation of a rain garden. Here's a picture of a residential rain garden. It's located in Corolla, right here on the Outer Banks, and I will confess it's one that my husband and I put in last year. It looks like a regular garden, doesn't it? So what makes it a rain garden? Well, here's a good working definition of a rain garden. The soil levels in many gardens is built up. For example, in a raised bed garden, we all are familiar with that. But rain gardens are actually recessed. The soil level lies below the surrounding ground level in order to capture rainwater runoff. Because it captures that runoff and because of the plant selection and soil preparation, rain gardens can withstand periods when the soil is saturated, as well as periods of dryness. So the bowl-shaped depression of the rain garden, which is designed to capture runoff, and the use of specific plants and soil preparation are what makes a rain garden a rain garden. Let's spend just a little brief time looking at what a rain garden isn't. As shown in that first slide, there's no big deep hole required. It's a shallow bowl. And rain gardens are not ponds or swamps, nor are they wetlands or bogs. All these require standing water or at least consistently moist soil. Neither of that is true of a rain garden. And finally, rain gardens are not mosquito breeding areas. Water should never sit in a rain garden for longer than 72 hours. Therefore, mosquitoes can't breed. Complete mosquito development from egg to adult does vary with species and temperature, but usually takes from 7 to 14 days, well beyond that 72 hours. Rain gardens can have many different looks depending on the site needs and the personal preferences of the property owner. Here's one that's full of flowering perennials. And here's one using mainly ornamental grasses. Looks very different from that first one. And here's an example of a rain garden in a shady area. It is located at our own Arboretum and Teaching Garden in Kill Devil Hills, so you can go take a look at it. The point is, all rain gardens can look different, but all rain gardens are designed to function the same. So, is a rain garden right for you? What are the benefits of putting in a rain garden? Here are some of the reasons for installing a rain garden. First, by capturing stormwater and locating it where you want it, rather than letting it go wherever it wants to go. For example, maybe under your house, a rain garden can reduce flood damage. Second, once established, and by using the right plants and augmenting the soil, rain gardens can reduce your water usage. The plants in the rain garden use the water captured by that rain garden, so they need little watering. Third, rain gardens are natural stormwater pollution treatment plants. As the water in the rain garden drains into the ground, the pollutants it carries are filtered and removed by its augmented soil before they can reach groundwater level. And last but not least, rain gardens are attractive landscaping features adding value to your property. A rain garden helps to mitigate the problems of flooding, water usage, and pollution while adding value to your landscape. All good reasons to consider putting one in. Let's look more closely at how a rain garden may help solve these problems. First, flooding. We've all seen a lot of this. It's referred to as nuisance flooding. but it's a real issue here along our coast and far from a nuisance. Rain gardens help to prevent rainwater from running off roads, driveways, and streets, hardscape, directly into waterways, as well as flooding pools and backyards. Rain gardens will not capture all the runoff from a major rain event, such as a hurricane or a nor'easter, which can dump, as we know, 2 feet of water at one time, although they do help in those situations. Rain gardens are designed, in particular, to work with an average rain event, those storms that produce 1 to 3 inches of rainwater, which is a lot of rainwater. Scientists at the North Carolina National Estuarine Research Reserve estimate that in an undeveloped natural environment, during a rain event, 10% of the rainwater runs off the land, 50% of the rainwater actually gets into or infiltrates the soil, and 40% either is used by the plants on the land, then released back into the air through transpiration, or goes back up directly into the atmosphere as evaporation, or as those scientists say, evapotranspiration. But in a developed environment, such as the Outer Banks, some of these percentages change significantly. For example, there's only 35% infiltration, that is, that rainwater goes into the soil instead of 50%, and there's 30% runoff instead of only 10%. A rain garden is one way a homeowner can replicate what nature does so well, letting stormwater infiltrate into the soil, a good deal for all of us. The second issue, the overuse of our limited water supply. A rain garden, once established, is unique in that it is designed to reduce water usage. The combination of the rain garden's plant selection. The plants are chosen specifically because they do well, not only when the rain garden is flooded, but also when it's dry. The prepared or augmented soil of the rain garden allows the rainwater to infiltrate the soil in the rain garden. The bowl shape, which collects rainwater, and the addition of a fairly thick layer of mulch, which holds in moisture, all these make a rain garden a good bet to survive when water is scarce. In the long run, you'll need to water less since the plants in a rain garden are able to take advantage of its collective moisture. Finally, the issue of water pollution. A rain garden is an effective pollution solution. First is a filtering device for pollutants. It's important to remember that stormwater is just not rainwater. It carries a variety of pollutants from various sources. For example, roof shingles. They contain heavy metals like copper and lead. Lawns and gardens. When washed directly into our waterways, excessive garden and lawn care products, such as fertilizers, contain nitrogen and phosphorus, which promote algae growth, which not only crowd out aquatic plants, but high algae levels also deplete water oxygen levels, which is a death sentence for oysters, fish, crabs, and other water creatures. Rain gardens help to filter these contaminants through its augmented soil and plants. How does this work? The plants absorb the pollutants via their roots, and then the pollutants are either held in the plant or used by the plant. Pollutants also attach or bind through a chemical process to the augmented soil itself, therefore are less likely to move downward and pollute our groundwater. Finally, earthworms and microorganisms in the augmented soil of the rain garden ingest and neutralize pollutants. Second, rain gardens act as an actual physical barrier to stormwater. How does this work? The rain garden is located specifically between the sources of stormwater runoff, hardscape, including roofs and concrete driveways, and where you don't want it to go, in particular directly into our waterways. And remember, it's bowl-shaped. It collects the rainwater. So if you have problems with flooding after storms, or worry about our dwindling water supplies or pollution in our waters, you may want to consider putting in a rain garden. If you decide to build a rain garden, the first decision you must make is where to locate it. Just like in real estate, location, location, location is very important. Basically, you want to place the rain garden between the sources of the runoff, those roofs, driveways, and streets, and the runoff's final destination. For example, streams, canals, swimming pools, or under your houses, the places it shouldn't go. Site analysis will help you select the best site for your rain garden. This analysis includes, first, drainage or infiltration analysis. You're looking for a site with drains within 72 hours. I mentioned this earlier. Remember, 72 hours is the maximum time water should stand in a rain garden. How do you know if your site is going to be good for this? You want to do a perk test. It's really very simple. You want to dig a hole 1 foot deep and 1 foot wide at your proposed site. Fill it with water and time how long it takes to drain. The second analysis you want to do is your water table. According to Clemson University, the water table, or groundwater, should be at least 18 inches below the floor or bottom of your rain garden. Remember, you want to have that water filter through the soil before it reaches groundwater level. Again, it's a very simple test. Do a test hole. Dig a hole at least 2 feet deep at this time, and if you're not hitting water, it's probably going to be a good site for you. But there are some other considerations that you want to think about when you're putting in your rain garden. The slope of your land, of course, is important, and first of all, it shouldn't be within 10 feet of your house's foundation, or it should also not be 25 feet from a septic system, drain field, or a wellhead. In both of those cases, think about it. You're bringing water into these locations. Remember, the rain garden's collecting water. You want to avoid wetness that's close to your foundation, and you definitely don't want to compromise your septic drain field or your wellhead. Another consideration is you want to make sure you're going to avoid underground utility lines when you put one in. Be sure to do this before you start digging. It's very simple. You just have to call 811 here in North Carolina, and they will come out and mark where your utility lines are. A couple of other considerations. The experts say the best location will be in partial to full sun, but you can have a shade rain garden. You saw the picture earlier of the one in the Arboretum. You'll just have a different plant selection. Also, keep in mind that plants for a rain garden prefer a slightly acidic soil, that is, one that has a pH level between 5.5 and 6.5, so get your soil tested. If you're a master gardener, you're aware that North Carolina has free soil tests through the extension from April through November. Otherwise, there's a $4 fee, but now's a good time to do that. A rain garden is fairly easy and inexpensive to build. There's 5 basic steps to follow when creating one. First, we've already gone over this, the location and soil of the garden needs to be evaluated. Those are the perk tests, the water table tests, and the soil tests. Remember, water must enter into, infiltrate, and drain down, filtrate through the rain garden fairly quickly. Sandy soil, like here on the coast, usually has good infiltration and filtration properties, but needs to be amended to improve its water retention qualities. Remember, you want to hold some of that moisture in the soil so your plants can utilize it. You also want to improve its ability to actually grow plants. I don't know about you, but it's pretty hard to grow plants just in sand. Second, a depression is dug approximately 9 inches deep because you want a 6-inch ponding depth, and you're going to be adding mulch about 3 inches thick. So you want to make sure you go down at least 9 inches. You also have to aerate, and this is where you're going to amend your soil about 6 inches below that 9 inches, the place where obviously your rain garden plants' roots are going to live, and that's where they're going to get their nutrients. Third, obviously, is amend the soil. Overall, you want approximately 60% sand, 20% compost or other organic material, and 20% topsoil in your rain garden. Organic matter is very important. It encourages the growth of microscopic organisms and earthworms, mentioned them earlier, which are important to healthy soil and to aid in the removal of pollutants. Fourth is actually planting those plants, but you also have to select them and get them in the ground and mulch them after planting. Plants slow the water flow as it moves across the landscape and, of course, works to remove pollutants. Remember, rain garden plants must be able to survive and thrive in short periods of flooding, because that's the point of it, and extended periods of drought, because there'll be lots of times when it doesn't have water in the rain garden. So there are specific plants to use in a rain garden. We'll go over some of the appropriate plants in a moment. After you plant, you're going to add, as I mentioned, approximately 3 inches of mulch. You want to keep it away, of course, from the stems of your plants, and also, hardwood mulch is recommended for use in a rain garden since it floats less than, say, pine straw, which I know people use a lot of. Finally, there's ongoing maintenance. I always put this in. Basically, what this means is the same as for all gardens. Keep in mind, though, once established, a rain garden, I think, is going to be a lower maintenance part of your landscape, which is another benefit of a rain garden. First of all, you're going to have to water, which I know sounds counterintuitive, but there is a little bit of watering involved, certainly right after you plant. And during that first growing season, until your plants become established, you'll have to water probably on a more regular basis. If you don't have any rain for 7 to 10 days, you'll have to water. As in most gardens, a rain garden needs about 1 inch of water a week. After that, though, you only have to water during periods when there's severe drought, which I define as 4 weeks without water, so there's less watering. There is some mulching involved. You put in that initial 3 inches of mulch, and then annually you should add to it. I would suggest that you don't just sort of fluff up the mulch, because what that does is bring weed seeds to the surface, and then you have to do more weeding, which you want to, of course, alleviate. But when you have that heavy layer of mulch, that does keep the weeds down. And depending on what kind of plants you put in your rain garden, if you use woody plants, you may have to do some shaping up and pruning. So there's not a lot of just sort of normal kind of garden maintenance in a rain garden. What plants to use in a rain garden? The next few slides will feature some of the perennials that work well in a rain garden. Most of these, I think, are going to be familiar to you. All the ones that we're featuring right here are deer resistant, which I know is very important, and most are at least moderately salt tolerant, so that's a great feature as well. I mentioned just briefly, we're just going to show a few of the plants. Some of the resources that we'll list at the end of the program do have extensive lists of plants that you can use in a rain garden, but just to get started with the plants, Rudbeckia, Black-Eyed Susan, I know is very popular here on the Outer Banks, and it grows very well. And milkweed, another great plant for a rain garden. We're featuring the swamp milkweed here, but another variety is the butterfly weed, which you may be familiar with, which is a great plant. It does very well in rain gardens, and it is the host plant for monarch butterflies. Coreopsis. We're showing a pink variety, but there are other varieties that have yellow or gold-colored blooms. In particular, the moss-eared variety is very common, can be found in all the big box stores. Coreopsis is very salt-tolerant, so it's a great plant to put in your rain garden. A plant that you may not think of to put in a rain garden is the Joe Pye weed. Keep in mind, though, this grows very tall, well over 5 feet, maybe even close to 6 feet, but there are dwarf varieties that you might want to use. A couple of other plants that do well, the Stokes aster, which is a great summer flowering plant for a rain garden. It blooms in purple, blue, or white. Also hibiscus. Hibiscus does very well here in the Outer Banks. We're picturing the rose mallow here, but there are other varieties. One that I especially like is the red star hibiscus. Put it in my rain garden and it does very, very well. Couple of shrubs that do well in rain gardens. The winterberry, which is a form of holly, so you'll have to plant both a male and a female plant. Beautyberry, I think most of us are familiar with this, and this is one of those woody shrubs that has to be cut back severely so that you do get those beautiful magenta colored berries in the late summer and early fall. Grasses. Showed you a rain garden that's nothing but ornamental grasses. They do very well in a rain garden. First of all, they're heat, humidity, drought, they do well in those. Both of these, the mollygrass and the switchgrass, are native, so we know they do well. And I would say that this is just a sampling of the possible plants. There are more that you can use. But let's look at a real-life installation of a rain garden in a residential setting here on the Outer Banks. As I said, it's one that I put in, and I showed you this picture earlier. My yard is at the bottom of the picture. As you can see, it was flooded. The section in between these two fences, our fences and our neighbor's fence, you can see his pool was flooded. It looks pretty yucky. We talked to our fellow homeowner there because that section that's in between our fences is actually his property, and he wasn't too thrilled about all the flooding, so he said, yes, let's put in a rain garden there. So we got started last year. This is what it looks like in drier weather and on ground level. And here is my husband, who did most of the heavy lifting as far as digging at the site. And it's basically all hand dug, just using the normal kind of tools that you have on hand. It's approximately 12 by 6 feet. We did go down that recommended 9 inches and broke up and turned the soil a good 6 inches below that. And here I am augmenting the soil. Basically, we put in 8 2-quart bags of garden soil. We used 1.5 bags of dry cow manure. Since I compost, I store my finished compost in 32-gallon garbage cans, and we added 2 of those garbage cans of compost there. And when we were done planting, we used 4.5 bags of that no-float mulch, so the hardwood mulch. This is what it looked like when we were in the middle of planting, and that's the list pretty much of the perennials that we put in, and all of them are native except for the Shasta daisies. And as you'll see in a couple of more slides, they did pretty well. We also put in a couple of the native grasses. They were pretty little when I put them in. The plants I used for the most part were plants that I had in my garden, so I was using transplants in the rain garden. And this is what it looked like when we were done planting and mulching last year on May 8th. And I say that date because here's what it looked like just 10 days later on May 18th. Hurricane Arthur, if you recall, if you were down here, came through the Outer Banks, and my little rain garden definitely got flooded out. The only plants you can see is actually the red star hibiscus is pretty tall there, and the coreopsis is sticking up a little bit there. But I was happy to say that here it is the next day. On May 19th last year, it drained really well. There's still some water there, but not a whole lot, and the ground was still a little bit mushy. But because I was using transplants and some of the plants themselves were very small, they didn't survive that first flooding, which I wasn't really expecting in May. And so I would say the lesson I learned from this, that you want to make sure you're putting in plants with well-established roots, because you never know when it might flood here on the Outer Banks. This is what the garden looked like last year, midsummer. This was probably in July. It's flowering very well. Keep in mind, up in Kerala, we didn't have rain for almost 3 weeks during the middle of the hottest part of the summer, so I was watering it about once a week. And this is what the same rain garden looked like in early fall. You can see at this point those grasses really were blooming very well. And one thing I like about using perennials is because they change from season to season. You get a different look from the same garden, and it goes well into the fall. And we do get visitors. There's a neighbor peeking over my fence looking at the rain garden, and the red star hibiscus blooming there. And if you look real carefully at that lower picture, there is actually a monarch butterfly caterpillar on my butterfly weed. He was munching away, and that's the first time I've actually seen a monarch butterfly caterpillar on a plant. So I was really happy about that personally. So just in summary, a rain garden is a bowl-shaped depression designed to capture, use, and filter stormwater and pollution. Rain garden plants thrive during flooding and drought conditions. Rain gardens should be located between the source of runoff and where it shouldn't go. And there are 5 steps to building a rain garden. Assessing your proposed location for quick infiltration, filtration, and the soil needs. Creating that depression, digging it out. Amending the soil below the floor of the garden, adding your organic material, selecting appropriate plants, get them planted and mulched, and that ongoing maintenance. So these are some of the references I wanted to point out in particular. The one from Clemson University, even though it's called A Guide to Rain Gardens in South Carolina, it also works very well in North Carolina. And if you Google, just put in that title, this should, at least it's been for me, the first one that comes up. This also has that large selection of plants that you can use in a rain garden. Of course, our own NC State University. If you use that link and then actually search on rain gardens, you'll get many brochures and information on rain gardens. So I thought that would be important, that you may want to do that. And I would also point out that the North Carolina Coastal Federation plays a really important role in cleaning our waterways, and they practice what they preach. They have an office here in Wanchese that has a rain garden in the front of it, and you might want to go visit that and see what they do. So you can get in touch with our Ask a Master Gardener, either calling that number or sending in to the greenlineobx@gmail.com. Also, the Master Gardeners, they will have a table on Wednesday mornings at the Arboretum where you can bring your questions. Thank you all for your time. It was fun to do this, more fun than I thought it was going to be. Thank you.